Okay, so welcome to today's class. Good afternoon, everybody. And you guys already know I'm Victor, and today we are going to talk about CORS and Morgan packages. Okay, so in the course of we building our APIs, right, there were some things that we didn't consider, which were kind of missing because we wanted to get on building the APIs first. Then from there, understanding how to build the API. After that, we can then add some few things, right? Now, one of those packages that we didn't use, right, is, or two of the packages that we didn't use in our projects, right, were CORS and Morgan. Okay, and I'll explain what CORS does, what's the usefulness of CORS, and what's the usefulness of Morgan package. Okay, so what's CORS? If you want to start with, I know you guys must have seen maybe an error if you try to maybe for full stack developers, or people that want to be full stack developers, maybe they built a front end maybe a UI, right? And then they try to maybe make a request to their back end, and it was telling them that CORS has blocked their request, and then they should include allow header or allow something like that on CORS, right? I'm sure maybe most people have come across that that scenario, right? And then how do we actually work with that scenario? How do we manage it, right? And why does that scenario even come up? That's number one. And then that's for CORS, right? We will answer those questions for CORS. Then for Morgan, right? I'll just explain what Morgan is. Morgan is just a logger, right? If you notice that each time we made requests to our API didn't show us anything that has to do with that request, or what kind of request came in, how long did it take for that request to complete and send back a response, what was the request method, what route was that request sent to, right? We just basically left in the blue. A request comes in and a response goes back, and there's no log for that request and response. We just hope that maybe it worked when we were testing, right? Which is not really like cool. Okay, so you need to have a way that you can maybe measure or view what is happening as per maybe each request that comes to your API. You should at least see some information about that request. Okay, so that's the usefulness of Morgan, while CORS is used for cross-origin resource sharing. Now, what's the meaning? What's the full meaning of CORS? CORS means cross-origin request sharing, resource sharing. Sorry, and the usefulness of CORS is most times when you're trying to access a resource that is not on your same origin, right? Let's take, for example, you have a front end running on maybe localhost with a port of 3000, and your backend is running on localhost but with a port of 4000. You see that those two are not from the same origin, right? One has the origin of port 3000 as his like port, right? The other one has his port as 4000, right? So normally, right, if you send a request now to your API, right, from your front end, since they are of different origins, that request won't be granted. Now, CORS is what can actually maybe enable that request, that it can allow the request. It can be like, okay, this request can go through, or this request from this particular origin, right, can go through, then every other origin, you can restrict it, right? You can also use CORS to restrict the kind of method that your API can accept. For example, you can say, okay, this my API should only accept GET requests, right? If someone tries to make a POST request, you should bounce that request back. You shouldn't accept it. Okay. Then something like Postman. Postman is not affected by CORS, right? Because Postman doesn't have that it doesn't run on a particular port that you say, okay, the Postman has this port and maybe your backend has a different port and the rest. So that's why you can test your backend with Postman without needing to configure CORS on your backend, on your API or your Express server. Okay, so let's see what's CORS. I've explained what CORS is, the full meaning of CORS, cross-origin resource sharing. Then we would see how to set CORS options, right? Like the origin, we can accept requests from the methods that we might want to accept and the headers, right? Sometimes you might not really need to set all these things. You might just need to set only the allowed origin. Then we'll see why Morgan is important and then how to actually use Morgan, right? So now I guess with what I've said, you should just move over to VS Code and start writing, start testing out what I've explained so far, right? So let's go over to VS Code. And you should be seeing my VS Code screen right about now. Okay, so I'll illustrate this I'll try to create a front end file and then we'll see how we can work. So first, I'll just say npm start to start our back end, right? Then I'm going to create a front end folder. I'll create a folder here, somewhere here. I'll just name it front end, right? And then inside that front end folder, I'll just create an index.js, index.html, right? And then I will write a little bit of front end today. So say HTML, let me just create a simple login form, right? So I'll say div input type of text. Sorry for people that might not understand the front end. I'll just create a login form, right? Input type of text. This one will be input type of password. And I'll give this an ID of wait, let me check. What do we have here? How do we log in? Okay, email and password, right? So we'll come here, we'll say type of email, we'll give this an ID of email, and then password here. We'll give this an ID of password, right? Also, as a backend developer, you should know how to write a little bit of front end, right? We'd say style. Then inside the style, I'll just say I'll give this an idea of login form, right? And I'll say hash login form, right? And then this login form, we'll just give it maybe a width of 400 pixel, and then the body here, I'll give it a width of 100%, a height of 100 VH, a display of flex, justify content, center, align items, center. So we would know that this form should show in the middle. And then this login form, I could give it a display of flex, right? A flex direction of column and a gap of let's say 20 pixels for the gap. Then for each input, I could also do this. This is what I like doing. I'd say asterisk that the box sizing should be border box. Okay. Then down here, I'd say for each of the inputs that want to give it a width of 100% for each input and the button. Input and button, want to give them a width of 100%, a padding of so let's say 10 pixels, 5 pixels. Okay, and let's see how this is going to look, right? So how do I run this? How do I bring this to life? I'll just click on go live. And then it should pop up my browser to you guys to see. So this is what I came up with. So I can put my email here, my password, and I click on login, right? And let's go back. We can see, we would see how it request without using CORS fetch 2 of login form, right? And example at, and then here the pass the 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 asterisks. Then for my login button, I could give this an idea of, I could come here and say background color should be blue. What's going on? Okay, I think I know why. Then I could give this a color of white, right? Then how do we make this? How do we bring this login button or login form to life? I would say script, which is where I'll write my JavaScript, right? This is like front end. So I could say const email should be equals to documents.get elements by ID. And we'll say the ID is email. I'll do the same thing for password, right? I'll say password, and then I'll do the same thing for login button. I'll say it should be login button in camel case, right? And then I would say the login button dot add events listener. I want to listen to a click event. And when there's a click event, I want to fire up this function, right? And then the function would be that we want to fetch, right? This would be an async. I'd say const result should be, or I like calling it response should be equals to await fetch, and I want to fetch from, I think, okay, it's running on port 4000. So I'll say HTTP localhost colon 4000 forward slash I can't remember, forward slash what, forward slash auth forward slash login, I guess, right? Forward slash auth forward slash login, right? Okay, so let's come back here. I'll say forward slash auth forward slash login, and then I'll pass in the method as post. I'll pass in headers. The headers would have content type as application slash JSON, right? And then we'll give it a body. Remember that it's HTTP, so we are supposed to send text back to the back end. So we'll say JSON.stringify, and then we want to stringify where the email is going to be email.value, and then the password is going to be the password value, right? And then when the response comes back, we would say const data should be equals to await response dot text, right? Because when we try to log in, let's come back here. When we try to log in, what do we get back? We get JSON, not text. So I'll come back and change this to JSON. Okay, then we can just simply console.log the data we get. Now remember that this is an async await, right? So we can wrap it within a try catch, right? So we say we want to try to log in, right? But if we can't log in successfully, we want to catch whatever error is being sent. So we can console.log maybe the error here, and then we can alert the user that an error occurred, right? So we've done that. Let's come back to our browser and let's see what we've done so far. So I created this minimal login form, right? And let's see. Let me check, right? What's my username and password? Okay, cookupjunior@gmail.com, Victor1234. Okay, so if I said this should be cookupjunior@gmail.com, and this should be Victor1234, and I click on login. See, it says an error occurred. So what is the error that occurred, right? Let's come here and let's check on the console. Yes, I got what I wanted. So if we read here, if you look here, it will tell you access to fetch at localhost 4000 from origin, which is 127.0.0.1 colon 5500 has been blocked by CORS policy. Response to preflight doesn't pass. Access control check, no access control, allow origin, header is present. If an opaque response serves your need, set the request mode to no CORS to fetch the resources with CORS disabled. Okay, well, that was really long to read, right? But what is basically happening here is we are trying to make a request from localhost of 55 with the port of 550, but we are making it to the backend, which runs on a different port, which is 4000. And basically, CORS has blocked this, right? So how do you tell our backend that it should accept any request coming from 5500, right? With the port of 550, how do we tell it? Okay, so let's come back to our VS Code and let's see what we can do. Right now, what we just need to do first is we need to install CORS. So say npm install CORS, right? And then we've installed CORS. If we check here, you see that we have CORS now, right? And then what you can do is now you can set CORS for your entire project, or you can just set CORS for a specific route, right? But then I would like to set CORS for my entire project, right? Or for my entire backend. So I'd say CORS should be equals to require, and I'll say require CORS, right? Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add it as a middleware, maybe anywhere here, right? Anywhere here. But I like keeping all my middlewares in the same place, one place. So I could then say app.use, right? And I'll say app.use CORS. But then inside this CORS, I need to declare the options that I want CORS to work with. So for example, I could say CORS accepts the origins, right? Origin is like where the request is coming from. So I could say CORS should accept origin of HTTP : local hosts with the port of 5500, right? So now, me simply doing this is going to restrict my my API from accepting any other request from any other ports, right? It's only going to accept requests from localhost with the port of 5500. Okay. Then let's come back to let's go back to our browser and see. Let's try to make that request again from our browser. Let's see what it's going to give us. Okay, so we come back here, Junior Victor 1234. We click on login. Okay, what does it say? It's still giving us the same issue. It's saying localhost. Okay, 127.0.0.1:5500. So let's go back to our VS Code. Let's see. I think I should change this to 127.0.0.1, right? And let's try and make that request again. All right, so Jacob Junior Victor 1234. Right, so now it's no more restricting us, right? But rather it's saying what is it saying? Okay, it's returning a 401, right? And it's saying unauthorized. So let's see. Let's go back to VS Code and let's see what is going on. I think I didn't make the request to the right place. I was supposed to say /v1/auth. So it's supposed to be /v1/auth/login, right? So I wasn't making it to the right place, right? So now let's come back to our browser and let's try to make that request again. Victor 1234, and then we click on login. Now you see it's now showing sign up or sign in successful, and it's showing the token there. So which means we've granted CORS, we've told CORS that, okay, anything that's coming from port of 5500, that it should allow it to pass through. But if it's not on from the port of 550, it shouldn't allow it, right? So let me go and remove that CORS, and let's make the request again to just be very sure that CORS is working properly. So if we come back here and we comment that line, and we come back to our browser, and try to make the same requests. Victor 1, 2, 3, 4. You see, it doesn't allow us. It's telling us CORS has blocked it, right? But if we come back here and on comments on that, and then we come back to our browser, make the request again. We click login. Now it works, right? So this is what people use most times on their API. So if they want to restrict, for example, maybe let's say maybe a company's API, they don't want it to be open to the public. So what they can do is they'll say, okay, they'll say, let me go back to my VS Code. Maybe the URL for their front end is maybe victor.com. So they will come here and say the origin should be victor.com. Now, note, you can pass an array of whitelisted base URLs, right? Or you can pass it as a list of comma separated values, right? This is what I mean. If I want maybe the port of 550 and the port of maybe 3000 and the port of 8000 to be able to communicate with my backend, I could say, okay, the HTTP with the port of 5.0.0.1 colon, let's say 3000, should also be able to communicate. I could add more and more, right? So if the port is 5500 or the port is 3000, my backend will like accept that communication, right? But then if it is not any of these two, it won't accept it. Then another way of doing the same thing would be to maybe pass it as an array, right? So you can do something like this. This is also valid, right? You can pass the list of your origins, right? And let's see, I think there is a way I can actually make this run. So let's see, front end. Let me try to make front end run on by up a server, http.server. I want to make it run on port 3000. Okay, so I spinned up an HTTP, sorry, I've spinned up a port on port 3000 for this index.html. So let's go to my browser now. And let me go to localhost colon 3000, right? It loads up the same thing. And let me inspect, right? So I don't know what that password is. Okay. Let's come to be local hosts, right? It's not the same kind of. So it has to, if I'm using localhost, then I have to come and tell it that it's localhost here. So if I go back to the browser and refresh, let let me type the right password, Victor1234. Click on login. You see, it works on the port of 3000. I could spin up another server let me spin up another server to make it run on port 5500. Let me go back to VS Code. Let me add, let me go to front end, Python 3 minus n http.server 5500. So I've spinned up, so don't worry about what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is I'm just using Python to spin up servers with different ports and values, right? So I could come back here and let me go back to the port of, see, I have this one with the port of 3000. I have this one with the port of 5500. Let me go there again. Port of 5500 now. Cook Junior Victor 1234. You see, both of them works, right? You see, both of them are actually working. But then let me spin up maybe another port on different. Let me spin up. Let me spin up with the port of maybe 2000. So Python 3. I want to use the module http.server 2000. Okay, before doing that, cd to front end Python 3 and http.server 2000 port 2000. Let's come back to our browser and let's try to make requests with that port of 2000. So I'll come here, I'd say localhost with the port of 2000, inspect, Junior Victor 1234. See, an error occurred, and if we check, CORS is not aligning the port of 2000, but it's aligning the port of 3000 and 5500, and that was because of what we specified on our course here. So now, apart from origin, right, you can specify the methods that you want to accept. So the methods can be, you can say you are going to accept post method and get method alone. So if maybe someone tries to send a request with a put method, then CORS is going to bounce it back. So writing this is saying any of these two origins can send a post or a get request, right? You can send a post or a get request. And also, this could also be an array. If you don't want it to be a string, you can make it an array, right? And then another thing you can do is you can also restrict the kind of headers that is sent to your API. So you can allow some kind of headers, right? So you can say allow headers, and then you can say, okay, you want to allow an authorization header. You can allow maybe any other kind of header, right? You can list out the types of headers that you allow on your back end, right? So if there is any maybe extra header that you don't allow, then your course is going to like maybe bounce it back or filter it out, one of those, right? But then most times while you're on production, you don't want to care about what port you're running your front end on. You just want it that when once you send the request, irrespective of the port, that the backend should just pick it and use. What you can simply do is you can say that the origin, your course origin should just be asterisk. Now, note and mind you, you should never do this on your production server. You should only do it on your development server, right? This here is saying whatever port, wherever it's, even if it's a robot that is sending a request to your server, right? Or anything that's whatever can connect to the internet. As far as it can connect to the internet and it can send you a request that you should get it. That's if you push this code like this to your production server. This is bad, right? So if you're going to, before pushing your code right online, you should change this to maybe the specific front end you want to accept your request. So what some people do is they can do something like this. They can use process, they can use your environment variable. They can say process.env dot maybe whitelist, right? Then on their environment variable, they can set the whitelist, right? So they can then say maybe on their development server, which is offline, they can then maybe on their env, they can then go and do something like this. They can then go and say whitelist should be equals to asterisk. Then maybe this is their development server, right? But then on the production server, they can then go and say that the whitelist should be equals to maybe HTTPS, whatever front end they want to use. Maybe the name of their front end is victor.com. They'll just say victor.com. So on the production server, victor.com is the only maybe front end or service that can send requests to their API, right? But offline on their development environment, they can use asterisk, which means anything, any port can or any origin can send a request to them. So do you guys understand what I've explained so far? Is there anybody that doesn't understand? Who doesn't understand? Are we all on the same page? Hello.
Yeah, on the same page.
All right, you understand, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So, and there are other things you can also use CORS to do, right? But then that's like the very basic thing you can use CORS to do, right? Now let's move over to Morgan, right? Now let me stop these servers and exit. Uh, let me stop those servers and exit them. Exit. Let me come here to stop that server, but I won't exit this one. Right? Now, if we come back to npm, you see, we've made a lot of requests to this server, right? But we are not seeing any log of the request. There's nothing here. It's just showing listening to port 4000, connected successfully to database, no matter the request you make, right? And that's not cool. If I come here and make a request now, right? Let me try to log in. Yeah, it logs in successfully, right? But I can't see any log here, which is not cool. Now, I want to see the log of whatever is happening on my back end. So what I'll do is I'll install Morgan. Morgan is a logger, right? It helps you maybe it accepted, maybe what request method was sent, and the rest of all those things, right? Okay. You can even see the response. All right, so I'm just waiting for Morgan to finish installing so that we can actually continue. It's taking too much time to install. Why? Let me try it again. Okay, yeah, it has finished installing. Okay, so Morgan has finished installing, and let's see how we can use it with our project. Now, Morgan is going to also be used as a middleware, right? Because it's not going to restrict your request from reaching the appropriate route. So you can say const, you can call it logger. People like calling it logger. Logger should be equals to require, and then you say require Morgan, right? So what is Morgan? Morgan is just a logger, what you can use to log out your log out information about requests that came to your server and the response and the rest of all those things, right? So let's see, how can we use Morgan? Now, you can say app.use logger, right? You can just say app.use logger like that. And let's make a request. I think it should work that way. If it doesn't work, then we'll see how we can tweak it. Let's see. Okay, so what do we see here? FFF 127.0.0.1. We see the date. We see the request method, right? We see the route. We see the HTTP version, right? For that request, we see the response, and we see the user client. This user client has to do with what sends that request actually, right? If I use the browser to send that request, let me use the browser to send the request. Now you see it's coming up as Mozilla, Linux, Next, this Apple WebKit. It's actually Chrome I used. So you see it's Chrome, right? It's saying Chrome here, right? So, but since I'm using VS Code, that's why I train VS Code REST client here as the user agents that send that request. Right now, there are different options you can pass to your logger, right? And let's see the different options. Let's come back here, right? You might not really need all this. You might just, okay, let's see some options we can pass to. Now, what if you just want, you just want to be, what if you just want to get the request status, right, of your request, right, of the request that comes in. Sorry, the response status, not the request status. The response status of your request. You can just come here and just say colon status, right? Then let's make a request and let's see what is going to show there. See, it's showing 200 there, right? So you can use this to be creative on your own. You can, you can come here and say, response status is, or you can just say response status, response status 200. I think if you want to get the method, you can say method, then you put colon and you say method, right? And then let me just test those two first. So if I send that request, you see, the response is 200 and the method was a post method. If it was a get method, it will show get here. If it was for maybe it will show before for here, right? You can also log out maybe the user agent who made that request to your back end. You can say, you can come back here and say, and user agent is, then you can then say user hyphen agent, right? So if we come back here, we make the request again. You see, it's saying response status 200, method is post, and the user agent is VS Code REST client, right? If I made this from a browser, right, I just made the request from a browser. You see the response is 200, method post, then the user agent is this long string here, right? So people can use this user agent to track the session, right? So if you log in from like 3 devices, you can actually track your session here, maybe block a session and the rest of the stuff. Maybe save this session and then save maybe the token, right, on your back end. And then if someone decides, if you decide to block a particular session, you can just maybe mark that particular token as maybe invalid or something, right? But then that's advanced, okay? But then let's see, right? It's not every time you want to type maybe this long string, right? There should be a way you can maybe use a shortcut to get something meaningful like this, right? So Morgan um, um, provides us with some shortcuts we can use to maybe log out things, right? Log out some certain details, right? The first one we have is def. So you say logger and then you pass the def there. This def is going to make is going to give you a specific kind of like response, right? Each time you make a request to your API, it will give you a specific kind of log with a particular kind of format. So let's see, right? Okay, this one gives you the request method, it gives you the URL, it gives you the method, sorry, the status, the response status. Okay, sorry about that. Then you see the number of milliseconds it took for that request, right, to be completed and a response sent back. And I can't remember what this 252 means, honestly, right? I can't really remember what this 252 means. But well, it's, you can read on their documentation to see what it really means. I can't remember it now, right? Then we can use this, no doubt, it's fine. Another one that is we have access to is short. Sure, I think short is the shorter form of this, right? So let's see. If we change this to short, instead of def, we change this to short, right? And then we come back and make that request again. I think short is the default one, which is what we got that first time. FFF 127.0.0.1 post request method, the request, the HTTP version 200, the 252, and then the time it took for the request to be completed, right? Then we have let's see, right? So now, what's the usefulness of this? You can decide to use any of these, right? You can this. We've talked about dev. There is short. There is a tiny. There is a common. There is a combined. Right? Dev, short, DSTCC. DS. It's kind of an acronym. I like used to remember them. Dev, short, tiny, common, combined. Anyone, but dev is usually like what you should always use, right? Dev is what I like use most time. If you say the tiny, right, and make the request, you see how it looks. I mean, tiny is shorter than short, right? Post, log this, and then I think this one doesn't, this one leaves out some certain details, right? Okay, it didn't involve this 127.0.0.1. It just said post to this route. This is the response and the time, right? Plus the 252 there. Okay, right. So what I've shown so far, right? Does anybody have any question on like what I've shown today? Any question? Hello?
No question, but is that all we are doing today?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Kindly push the code so that we can put it.
Okay. All right. I'll push the code. So let me just add some things here. Apart from origin, you can have headers and Abby, sorry. Sorry. Origin, you have methods and you have allowed headers, right? Origin method, allow headers, right? And then most times, right? Of course, what I'm showing here is just the basic, right? The basic of it. You can go to CORS, right? CORS, that's npm. If you go to npmjs.com and then you search for CORS, you should see the details of this course, right? In fact, any package, any npm package, right? You can see the documentation to this package. Documentation should be your best friend as a developer because you can't just know everything, right? Even if you watch a tutorial on something, right, they will just show you maybe what you specifically need to know about that particular maybe package, right? But there might be more to that package that you might not maybe know about, right? So what I basically do is most times if I get to across a new package, right? I first try to maybe watch a tutorial or read about that package, maybe it's from someone else's tutorial on how to use that package. Then when I understand the concept of that package, I can then go to his documentation to read more about maybe what else I can use that package for, right? And that's like a very if you understand the package at its maybe very basic uh, way, right? Or it's basic to read on it, right? You understand a lot of things about that package and be able to use it for whatever you want to use it for. All right, so in the absence of any question, I think we should call it a day and thanks a lot for coming out for today's class and we'll see you next week. All right, thank you.
Hello, sorry. Hello.